A full English breakfast is made up of bacon, sausages, eggs, baked beans, mushrooms, tomatoes, and toasted bread. But when you look at how it is prepared in most homes, a lot of those standards are not followed. Mistakes are made from the very beginning, starting with what goes on the plate and continuing through how each part is cooked. I'm here to show you the most common mistakes Britons make when preparing a full English breakfast and how to get each part right so the final result actually comes together the way it should. Not knowing what actually belongs on a proper full English. A lot of mistakes begin before any cooking even starts. In many homes, a full English breakfast is treated as anything that can be fried and placed on a plate. As long as there is bacon, eggs, or sausages involved, it is often considered complete. Over time, this loose understanding has replaced the actual structure of the meal. A proper full English has a clear set of components. It is built around bacon, sausages, eggs, baked beans, mushrooms, tomatoes, and either toast or fried bread. In some cases, it also includes black pudding or hash browns, depending on preference. When that foundation is not understood, the balance of the meal is affected immediately. Some plates end up missing key elements, while others overload on one part and neglect another. You may see too much meat with very little to balance it, or everything focused on frying without including the lighter components that bring contrast. This affects more than just appearance. Each part of a full English plays a role. The beans add moisture, the tomatoes bring a slight acidity, the mushrooms add depth. And the bread helps carry everything together. When these elements are not properly included or balanced, the meal loses its structure. Understanding what belongs on the plate is the starting point. It sets the direction for everything that follows, from how each item is prepared to how the final plate comes together. Once that is clear, the next issue begins to show itself, and it happens when everything is treated as one single process instead of separate components that need to be managed differently. After deciding what goes on the plate, the next mistake shows up in how everything is cooked. In many homes, the full English is approached as one continuous fry. Everything goes into the pan or onto the heat around the same time, with the aim of getting it all done as quickly as possible. At first, this feels efficient. Fewer steps and less waiting, and everything appears to be cooking together. The problem is that each part of a full English behaves differently under heat. Sausages require a slower, more controlled start so they can cook through without splitting. Bacon needs careful handling depending on the cut, allowing fat to render without drying the meat. Mushrooms release moisture before they begin to brown. Eggs need a gentle finish to maintain texture. When all of these are treated as one process, none of them are given the conditions they need. The result is a plate where everything is technically cooked, but nothing is cooked properly. Sausages may be browned on the outside, but uneven inside. Bacon can turn overly dry or too greasy, mushrooms lose structure, and eggs are often rushed at the end. A more effective approach is to think of the full English as a series of components rather than a single task. Some items can be started earlier and finished later. Others need to be cooked fresh at the end. Managing this order allows each element to reach the right texture without interfering with the others. Once that shift is made, the cooking becomes more controlled and the final plate begins to feel more balanced. From here, attention turns to one of the most commonly mishandled parts of the breakfast, and it often comes down to how quickly it is cooked. Cooking sausages too fast, instead of letting them develop properly. Sausages are usually one of the first items to go into the pan, and because of that, they are often exposed to the highest heat right from the start. The intention is straightforward. A hotter pan feels like it will cook them faster and give them a good colour on the outside. What it actually does is push the cooking out of balance. A sausage is not solid all the way through. It is made up of meat, fat, and a significant amount of moisture held inside a casing. When that casing is exposed to high heat too quickly, the moisture inside begins to react almost immediately. As the temperature rises rapidly, the liquid inside starts to expand and turn into steam. With nowhere for that pressure to go, it pushes against the casing. This is why sausages often split in the pan. Once that happens, the juices escape. Those juices are what keep the sausage moist. As they leak out, the meat begins to dry and the texture becomes tighter and less pleasant to eat. Even in cases where the casing does not split, the cooking is still uneven. The outside is exposed to direct heat and begins to brown quickly, forming colour before the inside has had enough time to cook through. So while the surface looks ready, the centre is still catching up, which affects both texture and consistency. There is also the issue of fat rendering. Sausages contain fat that needs time to break down properly. When cooked too quickly, that fat does not have the chance to melt evenly into the meat. Instead, it can separate and sit in the pan, while the inside of the sausage remains less balanced in texture. A more controlled approach changes all of this. Starting sausages on a lower heat allows the internal temperature to rise gradually. The moisture inside has time to settle instead of building pressure, so the casing stays intact. The fat begins to render slowly, and moving through the meat and keeping it juicy. As the heat is maintained at a steady level, the inside and outside begin to cook at the same pace. Only after that foundation is set does the sausage develop an even, consistent colour on the surface. The result is completely different. The casing remains intact, the inside is fully cooked without being dry, and the texture is much more balanced from edge to centre. It may take longer than rushing them on high heat, but it avoids the very issues that most people end up trying to fix later. Now the attention shifts to another part of the breakfast where small differences in handling lead to very noticeable changes on the plate. Not adjusting how you cook. Bacon based on the type. Bacon may look simple to cook, but the way it is handled makes a clear difference to the final result. And in many homes, all bacon is treated the same. It goes straight into a hot pan and is left there until it looks cooked. The issue is that not all bacon behaves the same way under heat. There are two common types used in a full English, back bacon and streaky bacon, and each one responds differently during cooking. Back bacon is leaner, with less fat running through it. Because of that, it cooks more quickly and can dry out if left on high heat for too long. The moisture in the meat is lost early and the texture becomes firm rather than tender. Streaky bacon, on the other hand, contains more fat. That fat needs time to render slowly. If it is rushed on high heat, the outer edges can burn before the fat has properly broken down, leaving parts of it overly crisp while other parts remain chewy. Treating both types the same often leads to uneven results on the plate. A more controlled approach starts with moderate heat. This allows the fat in the streaky bacon to render gradually, creating a crisp texture without burning. At the same time, it prevents back bacon from losing moisture too quickly. Managing the heat in this way also allows you to control the final texture. Some prefer bacon slightly crisp, others prefer it softer. Both can be achieved, but only when the cooking is not rushed. Another detail that is often overlooked is what happens to the fat released during cooking. Instead of discarding it, that fat can be used to cook other parts of the breakfast, adding depth and bringing the elements together. When ignored, that opportunity is lost and the flavours remain disconnected. And if this is already helping you see where small adjustments can change the entire outcome, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps more people find this, and it means you won't miss the next breakdown. From here, the focus moves to something that often looks like a minor detail, yet it has a strong impact on texture when it is not handled correctly. Not removing moisture from potatoes before cooking. Potatoes are often included as hash browns or fried slices, and they seem straightforward to prepare. They are chopped, seasoned, and placed into the pan with the expectation that they will turn golden and crisp. What is usually overlooked is how much water potatoes naturally contain. Inside every potato is a high level of moisture. If that moisture is not dealt with before cooking, it changes how the potato behaves under heat. When potatoes go into the pan with excess water still inside them, that water begins to heat up and turn into steam. Instead of the surface crisping, the potato starts to soften from the inside out. This is why many hash browns or fried potatoes end up soft rather than crisp. They are not frying in the pan, they are partially steaming in their own moisture. The surface never fully develops that firm golden layer because the heat is constantly being interrupted by the release of water. A simple adjustment changes this completely. Removing that excess moisture before cooking allows the potato to respond properly to heat. When the surface is dry, it can begin to crisp as soon as it hits the pan. Instead of steaming, it starts to form structure. This is also what helps the potato hold its shape. Then, with less internal water interfering, the outside develops a stable layer while the inside softens at a controlled pace. Another benefit is how it affects flavor. When potatoes are allowed to crisp properly, they develop a richer, slightly nutty taste that is missing when they are softened by excess moisture. Taking the time to remove that water, whether by squeezing grated potatoes or allowing sliced ones to dry, makes a noticeable difference in both texture and flavor. Attention then shifts to another part of the breakfast that behaves in a similar way, where moisture plays a role but needs to be handled differently. Cooking mushrooms without letting them release their moisture. First, mushrooms are often added to the pan and expected to brown quickly, but they behave very differently from most other ingredients. Down a large portion of a mushroom is water. That moisture is held within its structure, and the way it is handled during cooking determines whether it develops flavor or simply softens. When mushrooms are placed into a pan and immediately cooked with oil or butter on high heat, the expectation is that they will start browning straight away. What actually happens is that they begin to release water almost instantly. As that water comes out, it collects in the pan and creates a moist cooking environment. Instead of frying, the mushrooms start to steam. This is why they often shrink, lose their firmness, and end up soft without developing much color. The flavor also becomes muted because proper browning has not taken place. Allowing the mushrooms to release that moisture first changes the outcome. Cooking them on a moderate heat without adding fat at the beginning gives that water time to escape. As it evaporates, the mushrooms begin to reduce in size and become more concentrated. Once that excess moisture is gone, the surface of the mushrooms is able to respond to heat properly. This is the stage where butter, oil, or seasoning can be introduced. At that point, instead of steaming, the mushrooms begin to brown. The texture improves, becoming firmer and more structured, while the flavor deepens significantly. Handling them this way also prevents them from becoming overly soft or watery on the plate. It is a small shift in timing, but it changes both texture and taste in a noticeable way. Another part of the breakfast faces a similar issue, not with moisture, but with how quickly it is exposed to heat. Rushing the eggs or cooking them on high heat. Eggs are usually left until the final stage of a full English, and that is where pressure begins to build. By the time everything else is nearly ready, there is a tendency to speed things up. The sausages are done, the bacon is resting, the plate is almost complete, and the focus shifts to finishing the eggs as quickly as possible. That urgency is what leads to the heat being turned too high. At first it appears efficient. The whites begin to set almost immediately, and it feels like the process is under control. In reality, that speed removes the ability to manage how the egg develops. Eggs are extremely sensitive to heat. The whites are made up of proteins that react quickly when exposed to temperature. As the heat rises, those proteins tighten and bond together. When this happens gradually, the whites become soft and set evenly. When it happens too quickly, they contract too fast, squeezing out moisture and becoming firm and rubbery. This is why eggs cooked on high heat often feel tough rather than delicate. The yolk behaves differently, but is affected at the same time. It is meant to stay smooth and slightly fluid, providing richness to the plate. When exposed to excessive heat, it begins to thicken too early, losing that soft, flowing consistency. Instead of adding balance, it becomes heavier and less responsive when cut into. This creates a clear imbalance on the plate. The whites feel tight and overworked, while the yolk loses the quality that is meant to bring everything together. Rather than complementing the bacon, sausages, and other elements, the egg starts to stand apart from them. A more controlled approach avoids this entirely. Using a lower heat allows the egg to set gradually. The whites take their time to firm up without becoming tough, and the yolk remains stable while holding its softness. This slower process keeps both parts of the egg in balance. There is also a final stage that makes a noticeable difference. Once the whites are mostly set, removing the pan from direct heat allows the remaining warmth to complete the cooking. The residual heat is enough to finish the top layer without exposing the egg to further intensity. Some choose to cover the pan briefly, allowing a gentle layer of steam to settle the surface without hardening it. This finishing step prevents overcooking and keeps the texture controlled. When handled this way, the egg begins to play its proper role on the plate, and the yolk adds richness that spreads into the other components, while the whites remain soft enough to support rather than overpower. With the eggs properly managed, the final outcome now depends on how everything is timed and brought together as one complete meal. Not timing everything to finish together. A full English breakfast is not just about cooking each item properly. The final result depends on how everything comes together at the same time. This is where most attempts fall apart. In many cases, each component is cooked in isolation without a clear plan for when it should be ready. One item finishes early and sits too long, another is rushed at the last minute, and by the time everything is on the plate, the balance is lost. The issue here is not skill, but coordination. Each part of a full English behaves differently. And some items like sausages and potatoes need more time and can be started earlier. Others like eggs and mushrooms are best cooked closer to the end so they remain fresh. There are also elements that can be partially cooked and then finished later to bring everything together. Without managing this sequence, the plate becomes uneven. You may end up with sausages that have cooled slightly, bacon that has lost its texture, eggs that were rushed, and other elements that no longer feel connected. Even if each part was cooked reasonably well on its own, the final result feels disjointed. A more structured approach changes this completely. Planning the order of cooking allows each component to reach the right stage at the right time. Some items are brought close to completion and held briefly, while others are finished just before serving. And this ensures that everything arrives on the plate hot, properly cooked, and in balance with each other. This is what gives a full English its structure. It is not just a collection of cooked items, but a combination of textures, temperatures, and flavors that are meant to work together. When the timing is right, the meal feels complete rather than assembled. And once this final piece is in place, everything else begins to make sense. A full English breakfast may seem simple at first, but as you have seen, the result depends on a series of small decisions made along the way. From understanding what belongs on the plate to managing heat, moisture, and timing, each step plays a role in how the final meal turns out. When those steps are overlooked, the result becomes inconsistent, but when they are handled properly, everything begins to come together. The bacon holds its texture, the sausages cook evenly, the eggs remain balanced, and each component supports the others instead of competing for attention. These are not complicated changes. They are simple adjustments that bring control back into the process and make the outcome more predictable. Share your thoughts in the comments. It would be useful to know which of these mistakes stood out to you the most. Also, kindly like the video and subscribe to the channel so you do not miss what comes next.